The bridge isn't gonna hold! Move, move, move!
It's about to collapse! Get your ass out of there! We are under heavy attack on the highway bridge. Up map grid. 244 352. Request helicopter gunship support. Over.
Working on it, Bravo 5. Multiple forces in the area may be able to assist, but we cannot confirm at this time. Base played out.
Useless wanker! Captain Price! We're on our own, sir! It's bloody good to hear from you, mate!
Stand by. We are almost there. ETA 3 minutes. Kamarov out.
Tanker's about to blow! Move!
Hello everyone, welcome to part 2 of the Compare and Contrasting Modern Warfare series I'm doing. Today's episode I'm going to refer to as Lines of Logic. So, in my last video, I kind of touched upon some of the problems I have with what I would refer to as the writing of character motives and like the story setup. Basically the stuff that sits in the background and acts as a foundation that the rest of the story sits on. Primarily, just actions that happen that probably don't actually have any consequence in the story, but they do happen regardless, and they drive me absolutely fucking insane. So where do I start? I will start with I will start with a spoiler warning right now. If you are interested in playing Modern Warfare 2019 or even Call of Duty 4 and learning their stories and stuff, I would recommend you turn off the video now and go play them before, and then come back to watch, because the nature of this video is going to spoil a bunch of the stuff that does happen in the plots of the game. So with that out of the way, that was my spoiler warning. Where do I begin? I guess where I will begin is the lines of logic that come from the villain side of things. Because this is probably more infuriating to me than the hero side, but the hero side is just as equally infuriating. That made no sense. So, to begin with the villains, it's easier for me because I think about this way more than I probably should, but here goes nothing. So the main plot of 2019 is, at least the background plot, not the actual like story, that you the player engage in, is that the Russians are invading the fictional Middle Eastern country of Urzikstan. And there are multiple explanations as to this that are given. One is they want to end a civil war happening in Urzikstan. One is they want to stop the terrorists in Urzikstan. So that's, and none of that is well defined and this is where the logic starts to already fall apart. And it's because they never take the time to explain this very well. If I may refer back to Call of Duty 4, the two primary conflicts that happen in Call of Duty 4 are there is a civil war in Russia between ultra-nationalists and loyalists, and in Saudi Arabia there is, or not Saudi Arabia, on the Arabian Peninsula, there is a military coup happening. And the military coup probably has a more immediate explanation as to why there's a military coup happening, but it is explained that basically Al-Assad and his forces are tired of the president of the ambiguous Arab country colluding with the West. In fact, there's a line where he basically says that he says that during the revolution they overthrew a monarchy that was colliding with the West, and now the president that they voted in is colluding with the West. So while we don't know the exact details of how he's colluding with the West, this president, we don't even know the president's, actually no, we do know the president's name, it's Al-Falani, but that doesn't matter, it's inconsequential to the main plot of the game, for the most part. It's just, the point is that we just vaguely know that he is colluding with the West somehow, and that is basically Al-Assad's excuse for committing a coup. Do we know everything about Al-Assad's backstory and history? No. But we do understand his goals as the one of the primary antagonists of Call of Duty 4. We understand his goal is to overthrow his government. And we understand how this goal is motivated, which is they want to basically detach themselves from Western influence. The civil war in Russia is, while not immediately explained, it's kind of obvious when you use the names government loyalists and ultra-nationalists. Typically, when a faction in real life is referred to as an ultra-nationalist group, it usually means that they're some sort of revolutionaries, like communist revolutionaries or something like that. So you kind of get the gist of what the Zakhaev's motive is and what his goals are. His goals are, we're going to overthrow the government we have and install a new government. And it's sort of expounded upon later on in the game after Zakhaev's son commits suicide, and Zakhaev explains that he wants to basically sever Western influence in Russia, similar to Al-Assad's goals. So you now understand Zakhaev's motive. You understand the motive and the goal. They're not said to the player necessarily, but they are put out there for the player to put two and two together, and it works. The Modern Warfare 2019, the Russia's invasion of Urzikstan is not well explained, at least not enough to say so. We're told that they're there to stop the terrorists. Alright, so was there a terrorist attack in Russia that led to Russia invading Urzikstan? That's never explained. So all we know is that some terrorists show up at one point, and they show up at one point in the story, and now there are terrorists, and the Russians are supposedly trying to stop the terrorists, but the Russians also refer to everybody who opposes them as terrorists. So, for instance, the rebels who are trying to get the Russians out of their country are terrorists, apparently. Again, none of this is explained. Like, was there a terrorist attack in Russia? Or is it an excuse Russia is using to invade so they could steal oil from Urzikstan or something like that, maybe? That's not explained. None of that's elaborated on. They mention a civil war. Okay, if there's a civil war in Urzikstan, then what was the... Like, who were the factions? We're never given that. The only two Urzikstan factions we know of are Farah and her rebels, and then the Wolf and the Butchers, Al Quesadilla faction. So, and those two are referenced as being reactions to the Russian invasion. Like, the rebels didn't supposedly exist until the Russians invaded. And Al Quesadilla, their origins aren't exactly well explained, but I think it's alluded to that they split off from the rebels at one point because they had disagreements about how they wanted to get rid of the Russians. And then, furthermore, that the Al Quesadilla now wants all foreign powers out of their country, which, you know, it's a motive that makes sense at the very least. But regardless, those are the only two Urzikstan factions we know about. So, were they at a civil war beforehand? Well, I don't know, because it's not well explained, and as I said before, I think it's alluded to that they were actually working together, and then they split apart. So, I don't know, you tell me. So the Russians' whole invasion into Urzikstan, it lacks any solid explanation that makes any sense. And then Al Quesadilla lacks any solid logical sense also. I think I said it in a previous version of the first video best, but the Russians lack motivation, and the Al Quesadilla lacks logic. So how does Al Quesadilla lack logic? So they say they want... Al Quesadilla's goal, explicitly said in the beginning of the game, is they don't fight for religion, they fight to remove all foreign powers from Urzikstan. Officially, the two foreign powers in Urzikstan are the U.S. and Russia. And the U.S. only has an embassy in Urzikstan. For the most part, I don't think they had ground troops up until a certain level, but it's not really, like, explained. All we know is that there are Russians in Urzikstan. So if they want the Russians out, that makes perfect sense, because the Russians are an invading force. But the Americans are trying to help the rebels throw the Russians out of the country. So why would they want the Americans to stop? If it's not, and not for religious reason. They say not for religious reasons, so what motive would the Al Quesadilla have to get rid of the Americans? Because as far as we could tell, the Americans' goal is just to help Russia, or help the rebels. So what? Okay, I guess they just don't want anybody helping them out. That means they're just xenophobic. Fine, but then their method to get rid of the U.S. is to do terrorist acts, like go and shoot up Piccadilly Square. So, to get America and Russia to leave Urzikstan, they go to London and they shoot up London. what is that logic? Like, as far as I know, from the, again, very limited amount of knowledge we're given, London's not invading, or England, excuse me, is not invading Urzikstan. England's not invading Urzikstan. America's trying to help get Russia out, the aggressors, Russia, out of their country. What is their motive for attacking London? Makes absolutely no sense. There's like no explanation for this. Like, there's not like a thing where like, oh, England's also in Urzikstan and they're not really helping the rebel. None of that. It's just straight up they I don't know what else to say or how else to put it. It's just not, none of it makes any sense, and it's not well explained, and it's frustrating. I don't know. Maybe someone else could tell me. I guess the point to tie this off with is that if I can't understand your villain's motives or their logic, then it becomes stupid. Again, to go back to Call of Duty 4, I understand the, while vague and basic notions that Zakhaev and al-Assad have, which is remove Western influence. At least they had motives, and they acted upon those in a logic that makes sense. So, al-Assad removes the president that is colluding with the West, and Zakhaev and his guys are trying to overthrow the government. It all makes perfect sense to me. I understand that. If they want, and I can tell what part of this is that, clearly they wanted to have references to real conflicts, but they also didn't want to offend anybody. So, the war in Urzikstan is very clearly a big reference to, give me a second, it'll come to my head. It'll come to my little pea-sized head. It's clearly a reference to the war in, Syria, which, if anybody's not familiar with that, a very, very, very brief version of the Syrian war is, basically, there was like an uprising that was trying to overthrow the Syrian president, and the conflict kind of got like messy. I believe at one point there was rumors of, or there was, chemical weapons being used. The Syrian government was backed by Russia, and the people trying to overthrow the Syrian government were backed by America. And at one point, ISIS showed up in Syria, and so Syria ended up in this extremely quasi-conflict where you have Muslim extremists, Syrians who want to overthrow their government, and the Syrian government and the Russian army. So the whole thing was just this big convoluted like mess of an issue and stuff. Lots of quasi like proxy war stuff, and it's like they wanted to reference that, but they didn't want to offend anybody. But in doing so, all they did was they made it so your villains now, like, they their motives are weak and meaningless, and their logic is stupid. So, like, again, going back to Call of Duty 4's example, Call of Duty 4, when they were making the game, there was an interview with one of the writers or something like that on Call of Duty 4, and he explained that when they were making the game, they didn't want to reference any real life conflicts, like, as in, they didn't want to, like, pose anything that might be considered commentary. They wanted to instead keep things neutral, because at the time there was like the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan, and they just felt like it would be better if they can find a way to write a story that didn't actually use those real life instances, because the wars were still happening. It wasn't like they happened and they were over with. So their method of doing this was they invented fake conflicts that were vague enough to where they weren't exactly trying to insult any of the parties involved. So a civil war in Russia with very vague political motivations it's not trying to say that, like, Russians are bad. It's just that, oh, you have a conflict in Russia. Everybody understands that. A military coup in the Arabian Peninsula, it's just, yeah, military coups just happen sometimes, and it's not meant to denigrate Arab, like, culture, or even, like, the Muslim religion or anything like that. Ironically, the game still got banned in Saudi Arabia, but that's because in Saudi Arabia's got laws about, like, depicting Arab countries in ruin or something like that. Spec Ops: The Line was banned in Saudi Arabia for depicting Dubai being destroyed by a sandstorm. Not even a war, a sandstorm destroyed Saudi Arabia, and they said, nope, you can't put that game in our country. So, they got very strict rules about that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's a little off topic. The point is that Call of Duty 4 was, for the most part, successful in creating conflicts that were designed not to basically be commentary on real life events. So they were trying to do that in Modern Warfare 2019, but they also wanted to be commentary, it feels like. Or at least they didn't want to be commentary, but they almost sort of are commenting on the conflict, because they reference real life, like, events in this game a lot. Like, for instance, the embassy getting attacked is very clearly a reference to the Benghazi U.S. embassy in Benghazi getting attacked. There's a part where you're on this highway that's full of wrecked cars, sniping, and it's a reference to a real-life event that happened in Afghanistan, where I think America bombed a whole highway full of people or something like that, because they thought there was terrorists or something, or maybe there was some other thing. I don't know the whole details of that, so I'm not gonna try to claim I know. What else? And then the main plot of the game is very clearly a reference to the Syrian war, and again, it doesn't, like, they want to reference these things, but they want to be vague, because they don't want to insult anybody, and all that does is it just creates Russia, who's, like, comically evil, and terrorists that have ill-defined logic. It's very stupid. It just demonstrates even a lack of understanding of, like, Middle Eastern culture, if or any of that. It's just, the whole thing is just very, like, quasi and stupid. And it's because they, instead of just trying to invent something new, the writers tried to retread old ground and reference real things. Because in my opinion, modern writers, a lot of them are dog shit, and they don't know how to create new ideas. They just have to reference things that they've already known. Another, I've spent enough time talking about the villains. I'm going to talk about the hero stuff that pisses me off, too, the logic that happens. And this is going to actually touch on the main plot of the game, mostly, kinda. So, yeah, and spoilers. So, the main plot of the game is the CIA are trying to blow up or steal a supply of gas that the Russians are making to send to Urzikstan to use in their war. And when they stole it, I can't remember what the motive was, if they were going to destroy the oil, or not the oil, the gas, or if they were going to use it as evidence against Russia. That part's not really well defined. I just know that they were going to try to steal the gas, and in the midst of trying to steal the gas, terrorists show up and steal the gas, who they immediately assume is Al-Qaeda, because Al-Qaeda is openly hostile towards the West, so immediately they assume it's them. Then so where does the logic start to break down is later in the game, sort of. One of the main characters, Hadir, who is the brother of Farah, turns out he's the one who stole the gas, not Al-Qaeda. In the beginning of the game, Hadir shows up to steal the gas, and he flees with the gas. And then he uses that gas to kill a bunch of Russians. He blows his load, basically, like, for no good reason. Some Russians are coming up the hill to your position, and then Hadir just can't contain himself, and he decides to throw his fucking secret gas attack at the Russians and kill them. And for obvious reasons, this pisses off Farah, but it also pisses off America, because it turns out that the rebels stole the gas, technically, even though it wasn't the rebels, it was just Hadir, possibly working with Al-Qaeda. And so now America says that Farah's rebels are terrorists, because Hadir acted on his own to steal chemical weapons to use against the Russians. If you're not understanding this, that's okay. I'm not understanding this either. So, the Americans are working directly with the commander of the rebels, Farah. So they know Farah did not initiate or they know Farah did not initiate or order the gas to be stolen. In fact, they know she's openly against the use of the chemical weapons. And yet, for some reason, they put her people on the terrorist list? What? And the CIA knows, though, that they're not terrorists. Like, this is where it gets frustrating. It's like, okay, so your field agents literally know that the fucking goddamn rebels are not bad guys, but their higher-ups are still saying, oh no, we are classifying them as terrorists now, and so therefore that you shoot them on sight. It's like, what are you fucking talking about? Then why did America get involved in this conflict to begin with if they had no interest working with the rebels? That's the other thing too. The Americans aren't like officially working with the rebels at first. They're like, they show up and the Americans have to gain the trust of the rebels. So then it's like it, it it's like, okay, so America wasn't trying to help the rebels at first, so why were they trying to steal the gas? Like, were they trying to help from the shadows? What, or was it like I said earlier, were they trying to what was their America's goal in this exactly? The CIA's goal? Like, what was the CIA doing? Like, they were just doing espionage just to troll Russia for shits and giggles? I don't get it. Like, it's not explained. None of it's explained. What are their motives? I don't understand our motives. Like, you want to stop Russia because they're doing bad things? Okay, but maybe you need to explain that at the beginning of the game. and then like, we're not working with the rebels to begin with. Like, I don't understand. Like, why would you not be officially like cooperating with them in the first place? Why would you? It, why would you like unofficially cooperate with them and then officially cooperate with them, and then when one of them goes rogue and starts working with the terrorists, why would you then declare the rebels to be also bad guys? Even though you know that the fucking rogue guy is not working with the rebels, he's working with the terrorists. It, like, the CIA, the whole point of the CIA is literally to gather intelligence to inform the decision makers. So, like, the decision makers in this game decided that, yeah, you know what, we don't like anybody in this war. I don't understand. Why would... Like, this writing is dog shit. I don't understand who's on whose side anymore. I only know that Captain Price and his guys are on Farah's side, but only because they like to go... These guys apparently like to break the rules. I don't understand how any of this coincides or works or fits together. So, yeah, this was like a lot more frustrating to go through than I thought. I'm asking more questions than I'm giving answers to. That's a problem. I guess the point I'm trying to get at with all of this is, actually, before I even say that, I guess I could do a little bit of the comparing I was making earlier. So, once again, talking about Call of Duty 4. Why would America get involved in al-Assad's coup attempt? Well, it's established that the president of that country was working with the West, and usually the West is America. So it makes perfect sense that the West would probably want to protect whatever asset they have that they were colluding with in the first place. So it makes perfect sense that the West would probably try to stop a military coup. Why are the Brits, or the West for that matter, getting involved in a Russian civil war? Well, the ultranationalists and the loyalists are fighting over a stockpile of 15,000 nukes. So I think one can assume that because they're fighting over these nukes, they want to make sure that the good Russians get the nukes and not the bad Russians who hate the West. Probably to prevent a Cold War. And probably not even a Cold War, probably a hot war, because Zakhaev launches the nukes, and Zakhaev doesn't just even launch the nukes, he sells the fucking nukes to al-Assad. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that The West has a vested interest in these conflicts. Both of these conflicts, the Arabian one, because they have interest in the Arabian Peninsula, cough cough, probably oil, cough cough, and making sure that nuclear weapons don't fall into the wrong hands is also not a bad idea. I understand those motives. I understand those logics. These are not explicitly said to the player, but there's enough there where if you are somebody with common sense, you can pick up on it and say, "Oh yeah, okay, this makes sense. I get it." The conflicts and the hero's motives, particularly, I don't understand them because none of this is explained. Why is the CIA getting involved in the conflict in Urzikstan? What is the motive there? What vested interest do they have in Urzikstan? Is it just plain and simple they want to fuck with the Russians? Is it the Urzikstan's oil is at stake? Because I know I'm almost certain it's got nothing to do with helping out the rebels, because the CIA was not contacting the rebels until like this game starts anyway. So as far as I'm aware, the Americans and the Urzikstan rebels were not on good standing until the CIA made contact with them. So who's working with who and why? What is their motives? The only motive that makes any sense is Farah's rebels, and that is they just want they want the terrorists gone, and they want the Russians gone. It's like they just want peace in their country. I can understand that, and I can relate to that. I don't though understand what the Russians are trying to do. I don't understand what the terrorists' logic is. I understand their motive, but their means of achieving that motive are stupid. I don't understand what the CIA or the West, what their interest is in Urzikstan. So the whole fucking thing is just, the writing is stupid. It's a extremely cracky foundation that the game is built on. The only way I can explain this in terms that maybe most people would understand is imagine if I don't know, in the Avengers movie, just two guys in suits showed up and then they started punching each other. They don't explain their names or who they are. They just start punching each other. It's like, who's the good guy? I don't know. Who's the bad guy? I don't know. They're just both punching each other. If I don't understand them, it's stupid. You should always be able to understand them. I guess that's all I have to say about the story. Deep dive into a bunch of shit, politics and what have you. Fun stuff, guys. Alright. So my next video, I'm probably going to talk about some of the actual game itself. Like the gameplay and all that, because that's probably where most of the fun stuff lies. Anyway, everybody take care. See you in the next video.